Look at him. What a loser. One voice jeered. Another followed, louder, crueler. You really think you belong here? You'll never be more than a joke. Ethan's backpack slipped off his shoulder as his books spilled across the polished floor. His hands shook as he bent down to gather them. The sneers and footsteps surrounding him like a pack of wolves circling prey. And then, silence. Not because the bullies had left. No, because Ethan had looked up. His eyes weren't the same as before. This time, they carried a quiet fire, a storm waiting to break. What happened next would not only silence the bullies who tormented him, it would ripple far beyond the walls of that school, reminding everyone watching that day, and you watching this story now, that underestimating someone can be the greatest mistake of all. Stay with me, because this isn't just a story about bullies. It's about resilience, redemption, and a comeback so powerful, no one saw it coming. Ethan Miller was 16 years old, a junior at Brookdale High. And if you asked anyone in his class to describe him, you'd probably hear the same word over and over again: quiet. He wasn't the type to raise his hand in class. He wasn't the one making jokes in the cafeteria. He wasn't the kid dominating the basketball court after school. No, Ethan preferred the corners, the shadows, the unnoticed spaces where he could disappear without consequence. But quiet didn't mean weak. Quiet didn't mean small. And most importantly, quiet didn't mean defeated. Still, to the bullies, Ethan's silence was an invitation, a target painted on his back. The way they saw it, a kid who didn't fight back was a kid they could control. And so, day after day, Ethan carried their insults the way he carried his books. Heavy, unshakable, weighing him down. Home wasn't much easier. His mom, Melissa, worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, while his father had left years earlier, leaving Ethan with vague memories of promises never kept. Melissa did her best. She really did. But exhaustion clung to her face, and sometimes she missed the subtle signs of her son's crumbling spirit. There was one thing Ethan did have, though: a dream. He wanted to be an engineer. While the other kids were scrolling on their phones, Ethan was sketching blueprints of bridges, cars, even entire cities. In his notebooks were designs no one else knew existed. To him, the world wasn't about what was, it was about what could be. But what happens when your dreams collide with a reality determined to break you? Every day, Ethan asked himself the same question. Was he strong enough to keep going? And that's what this story is really about. Not just the cruelty of bullies, but the quiet power of standing back up. By the time we reach the end, you'll see exactly how Ethan transformed humiliation into strength, and why the bullies who once laughed at him would never, ever laugh again. Because the truth is this: comebacks don't always start loud. Sometimes they begin in silence. Before the laughter, before the cruel whispers in hallways, Ethan had always been different. As a boy, he was curious about everything. At 6 years old, while other kids were building Lego towers, Ethan was taking them apart to see how the pieces fit together. He once dismantled an old radio his mom had planned to throw away, just to figure out why the sound crackled. Hours later, Melissa found him sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, wires scattered everywhere, proudly announcing, "I fixed it, Mom." Melissa hugged him tight, her tired eyes brimming with pride. She was a single mother, working late nights at the diner and weekends at a laundromat. But Ethan gave her hope that all the sacrifices might mean something. "One day," she whispered, "you'll build things this world has never seen." But school was different. The same quiet, observant nature that made Ethan a dreamer also made him a target. There were 3 of them. Tyler, the ringleader, tall, loud, the kind of kid who could turn a cafeteria into his stage. Mason, his shadow, who laughed at everything Tyler said, not because it was funny, but because he was too afraid not to. And Jason, the muscle, broad-shouldered, slow to think, quick to shove. Together, they turned Ethan's life into a daily test of endurance. It started small. A notebook knocked from his hands. A chair pulled away before he sat down. But soon, it grew crueler. "Hey, sketch boy," Tyler sneered one afternoon, grabbing Ethan's drawings. "What's this supposed to be? A spaceship? Hate to break it to you, but you'll never leave this town." Mason cackled. Jason shoved Ethan's shoulder, and the pages of his designs fluttered to the floor like broken wings. That night, Ethan stayed up past midnight, taping the pages back together. His mom noticed a red in his eyes at breakfast. "Rough night?" she asked. He forced a smile. "Just working on an idea." He couldn't bring himself to tell her. She already carried enough. There was one adult, though, who noticed: Mr. Reynolds, the physics teacher. A graying man with kind eyes, he often saw Ethan sitting alone at lunch, sketching diagrams instead of socializing. One afternoon, he stopped by Ethan's desk and said quietly, "You know, the Wright brothers were laughed at too. They believed in flying before anyone else did. Sometimes the world mocks what it doesn't understand." Those words stuck with Ethan. He repeated them in his mind every time Tyler and his gang closed in. But even with Mr. Reynolds' encouragement, the pressure was relentless. The school hallways felt like narrow battlegrounds. Every locker door a possible ambush. Ethan tried to shrink himself, but the more he faded, the louder the bullies became. And somewhere deep inside, a question began to grow. Not just how long can I endure this, but when will it end? What Ethan didn't realize was that every late-night sketch, every cruel word he endured, every whispered encouragement from his mom and teacher was building toward a moment he couldn't yet see. The comeback was coming, and it would be one no one, especially the bullies, ever expected. The school year dragged on, and Ethan's tormentors seemed to grow bolder each day. It wasn't just the laughter in the hallways anymore. It was the way they seemed to follow him everywhere. At lunch, Derek would accidentally bump his tray, sending food splattering to the floor. In the locker room, Marcus would snatch Ethan's shoes and toss them across the room while the others howled in laughter. Ethan learned to keep his head down, but even in silence, the bullying never eased. If anything, it worsened. One afternoon in gym class, the coach announced a surprise basketball scrimmage. Teams were quickly picked, and of course, Ethan was chosen last, an afterthought. As the game began, the bullies worked together to set him up for embarrassment. Derek deliberately passed him the ball too hard, knowing Ethan would fumble it. Marcus blocked him mercilessly, sending him sprawling on the gym floor. The laughter echoed in his ears as the coach shook his head in disapproval. "Why don't you just sit this one out, Ethan?" the coach muttered, half out of pity, half out of frustration. Those words stung more than the laughter. It wasn't just his classmates who doubted him. It was the adults too. Later that evening, at home, Ethan locked himself in his room. His mother knocked gently on the door. Concern etched at her voice. "Ethan, honey, are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom," he lied. But inside, he wasn't fine. He was boiling with anger, shame, and a silent question that gnawed at him. Was this his life forever? To be the kid everyone laughed at, the one no one believed in? Things escalated weeks later during science class. Ethan had worked tirelessly on a group project, putting in late nights to ensure it was perfect. But when the presentation day arrived, Derek smoothly took credit for Ethan's ideas. The teacher praised Derek for his excellent research, while Ethan stood there, tongue-tied and invisible. After class, Ethan confronted him. "Why did you do that?" "That was my work," he demanded, his fists trembling. Derek smirked. "Because no one cares about you, Ethan. You're just a quiet kid. Stay in your lane." Marcus added, snickering. "And besides, who's going to believe you? You don't matter." That moment was Ethan's breaking point. The injustice wasn't just about being bullied anymore. It was about being erased, denied the chance to be seen, to be respected. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel like running away. He felt something different, a spark of determination, small but growing. He didn't know how or when, but deep inside, Ethan made a silent promise. This wasn't going to be his ending. The breaking point arrived on a cold Friday afternoon. The school was buzzing with excitement. The annual talent showcase was just a week away. It was one of the biggest events of the year, where students could display their gifts: music, art, sports demonstrations, comedy. The entire town showed up for it. For weeks, Ethan had quietly been preparing something of his own. Few people knew it, but Ethan had a hidden talent. He could play the piano with astonishing depth. Music was his refuge, the place he poured all the pain and frustration he couldn't put into words. Every night, After homework, he would sit at the old upright piano in the living room, letting his fingers glide across the keys. It was the one place he wasn't invisible. But Derek and Marcus weren't about to let him shine. Word somehow leaked that Ethan was planning to perform. The bullies saw their chance. During lunch that day, Derek shouted across the cafeteria, "Hey everyone, guess who signed up for the talent showcase? Ethan the Ghost Boy. Maybe he'll play a lullaby, so we can all fall asleep." The cafeteria erupted in laughter. Ethan froze, his tray shaking in his hands. But what happened next cut even deeper. That evening, when Ethan returned home, his piano keys had been tampered with. He sat down to practice, but the notes sounded off, warped, ruined. Someone had sneaked into the music room after school and messed with the instrument. His mother found him sitting there, hands still on the keys, tears streaking his face. "Ethan, what happened?" she whispered, heartbroken. "They don't want me to play. They want me to stay small, stay invisible." His voice cracked. Maybe they're right. That night, he almost quit. He almost erased his name from the talent list, almost let Derek and Marcus win. But as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, something shifted inside him. He thought about every tray of food spilled, every insult, every time they told him he didn't matter. And then he thought about the music, about how it made him feel alive, about how it was his voice, his truth. No, he wouldn't quit. The shocking twist came the next morning, when Ethan's best friend, Lily, arrived at his door. She had overheard Derek and Marcus bragging about what they did to the piano. Furious, she said, "You can't let them win, Ethan. You have something they'll never have. Real talent. Play anyway. Show them." That was the moment Ethan made his decision. He would perform, but not just to prove the bullies wrong, to prove to himself that he mattered. The stakes were higher than ever. If he failed, the bullies would have their biggest laugh yet in front of the entire school and community. But if he succeeded, it could change everything. Ethan looked at Lily, a fire sparking in his eyes. "I'm not backing down," he said quietly. "This time I fight back." The night of the talent showcase arrived, and the auditorium buzzed with electricity. Parents, teachers, and students filled every seat, the air thick with anticipation. Bright stage lights cast long shadows across the polished wooden floor. Ethan sat backstage, palms clammy, heart racing so fast he could hear it in his ears. The performers before him received polite applause, some cheers, some laughter, but Ethan wasn't focused on them. His mind kept circling one question: what if I fail? What they're right about me? From the audience, Derek and Marcus smirked, already whispering to their group. Derek leaned back in his seat and said loudly enough for others nearby to hear, "This is going to be hilarious. Ghost Boy trying to be Beethoven? Can't wait." Ethan almost let those words undo him. But then he remembered his mother's voice, calm but fierce. "Don't let anyone steal your light." And Lily's steady encouragement, "Show them who you are." When his name was finally called. Next, we welcome Ethan Miller to the stage. The applause was scattered, hesitant. A few kids chuckled. Ethan walked out slowly, shoulders tense, eyes lowered. But when he sat down at the piano, something extraordinary happened. He closed his eyes, took one deep breath, and let his fingers fall on the keys. The first notes floated through the hall, soft, delicate, like a whisper carried on the wind. Then the melody swelled, rich and commanding, pouring out emotion no words could capture. Every ounce of pain, humiliation, and longing he had carried for years spilled into the music. The crowd grew silent, jaws slackened. Even Derek and Marcus stopped smirking. The boy they had mocked as invisible was commanding the entire room without saying a word. Ethan's fingers moved with urgency, telling a story of struggle, heartbreak, and defiance. He built the music higher and higher until it thundered, filling every corner of the auditorium. The lights seemed brighter, the air charged. By the time he reached the final note, a trembling, powerful chord, the entire hall was on its feet. Thunderous applause erupted. Whistles, cheers, a standing ovation. Ethan sat there, chest heaving, eyes brimming with tears. For the first time, he wasn't invisible. He wasn't a ghost. He was seen. Derek and Marcus tried to laugh it off, but the truth was plain on their faces. shock, disbelief, maybe even fear. They could no longer deny what everyone had just witnessed. Ethan wasn't weak. He was stronger than they ever imagined. The auditorium wasn't clapping for a quiet kid anymore. They were clapping for a fighter who had turned his pain into power. And in that moment, Ethan realized this wasn't just about music. This was about reclaiming his voice. When the applause finally settled, Ethan stood, bowed awkwardly, and hurried off stage. Backstage, his music teacher caught him with tears in her eyes. "Ethan," she whispered, gripping his shoulders, "that wasn't just music. That was bravery. That was truth." Word of his performance spread through the school like wildfire. By the next morning, Ethan's name was on everyone's lips, not as the quiet boy who kept his head down, but as the kid who made the whole auditorium cry. And Derek and Marcus? Their smirks had vanished. They walked through the halls with their heads low, whispers trailing behind them. Some of their own friends called them out. "You clowns bullied him for months, and he crushed you in front of the whole school." For the first time, Ethan didn't feel hunted. The power had shifted. Derek and Marcus weren't feared anymore. They were pitted. At lunch, Lily slid into the seat across from Ethan with her tray. "See," she said, smiling. "Told you they'd never see it coming." Ethan grinned, small but real. It wasn't about being popular. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about proving to himself that he was more than their cruel words. Weeks later, Ethan was invited to play at a community event in town. Parents who had never noticed him before shook his hand. Teachers praised his resilience. And his mom, sitting in the front row, clapped the loudest, tears glistening in her eyes. The bullies hadn't just been silenced. They had been overshadowed, completely outshone by the boy they tried to break. And here's the truth this story leaves us with. Bullies thrive on silence. They want you small, invisible, afraid. But the moment you choose to rise, through your talent, your courage, your persistence, you strip away their power. Ethan's comeback wasn't about shaming Derek and Marcus. It was about reclaiming his own worth. About proving that the strongest revenge isn't anger. It's living so boldly that your very presence commands respect. So the next time someone tries to dim your light, remember Ethan's story. Remember that dignity, resilience, and self-belief can silence cruelty louder than any words. Sparkles if this story inspired you. Don't forget to thumbs up, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us. The ones who laugh at you today may one day be standing in awe tomorrow. Because in the end, bullies never expect the comeback.